Try it that way.
Oh, with that voice. Okay,
It's really loud. Got like 2 minutes.
2 minutes. You are hostess tonight after ceremony.
I am,
Okay,
I'm getting up and saying hello and then handing it over to Jack, who's
good plan.
much better at that than I am.
All right.
Are we ready? Hello. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me on Zoom? Hi, I'm Amy Rosenberg. I am with Neighbors United Peace Progress. I and Elise, the chair of Neighbors United for Progress, put this town hall together because we thought this was a topic that's relevant to the community and something that there's not a lot of information out there about. So we hope that you get a lot out of it. I am going to turn it over to our moderator, Jeff McCann, who you all know from our last town hall and from teaching their junior high school. Scare us.
I wouldn't say true.
All right. Thank you so much.
Well, I guess the first thing is, I'll have, this side to this side, have, announce who they are and what they do.
All right, well, my name is Lindsay Michaelson, new last name. I've been practicing substance abuse medicine throughout my entire residency and all 5 years that I've been practicing. So I've treated substance abuse all the way from a newborn baby that was born addicted to buprenorphine, pregnant mothers. Can you turn the mic up? We can't hear you. We can't hear me. I get Shut up, it's Rick. I was saying that I've practiced substance abuse medicine my entire residency, and I've treated everyone from a newborn baby that was born addicted to buprenorphine all the way up to people at end of life. It's very near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. The clinic that I was trained in integrated family medicine and substance abuse medicine pretty much seamlessly. And then I also got a unique opportunity to treat substance use disorders that were caused by chronic pain conditions and how they can somehow inadvertently develop into substance abuse problems. And so thank you for inviting me to be here. This is really important to me. I think the first thing that's really important to know about the fentanyl crisis in this town is it's not fentanyl. In terms of what we know to be fentanyl that you can get in the hospital if you have a surgery and they can't get your pain under control. But they're calling it the fentanyl. And so kids think it's okay. And the pill poppers are very, very convincing. So if you Google what fentanyl looks like, it's very likely to look like the fentanyl you're going to see online. It's not. It can be 50 times stronger than heroin. It can be 100 times stronger than morphine. 4 out of 10 pills will kill you, no matter how much you take. And now they're cutting it with veterinary grade anesthetic medications that buprenorphine doesn't work on. Buprenorphine does not reliably work on fentanyl. Fentanyl, huh? Oh, I'm sorry. Naloxone. Naloxone does not reliably work on fentanyl. Fentanyl is one of the only opiates that has a greater affinity for the pain receptor. So you have to use it differently. So there's a lot of things that people don't know they don't know when they're taking fentanyl. And so education is going to be paramount to this. People need to know it's not fentanyl. And you want to follow the instructions on the box of the Narcan, but while you're doing other things, namely calling 911. And so it's also extremely important that we let kids know what the Good Samaritan laws are out here. You are not going to get in trouble if you call 911, and neither is your friend. 44% of people who use opiates have been present at a serious overdose. 44. Think about what we could do to save lives if we got more Narcan available. If we let people know this drug you're taking is probably not what you think it is. And I see this every day. People will come in and we run urine tox screens, and our lab uses a gas chromatography type thing. You can't cool it, it breaks it down to the molecules. And they say, oh my gosh, I had no idea there was fentanyl in that. I could have sworn it was just meth. People don't know. And so it's going to be about education, and it's going to be about getting the community involved, and it's going to be about letting
Dawn.
really good treatment for this disease, because it is a disease and you can treat it really successfully. So, all right, I'm going to hand over to Dawn.
Thank you. I'm Dawn Meicher, nurse practitioner, and I've been working with Columbia County Health Systems for 15 years now. I started as an RN in Colorado in 1990, went right into the ICU. So worked with a lot of pain meds. We didn't have all the wonders we have now, just 30 some odd years later for heart attacks. So all we can really do is put you on a morphine drip and keep you comfortable and wait and see how much damage was done to your heart. It was the time of pain became the 5th vital sign. We documented it regularly, and we were very responsible as RNs for treating that pain. And much of the time it was with opioid pain medications in the hospital. When I graduated 17 years ago with my nurse practitioner, one of my first jobs, I took over a lot of an internal medicine who was retiring. And he had a huge amount of patients on high dose pain medications as outpatient. So it was a crash course in pain medication. Unfortunately, I had all those experiences in ICU. But the pendulum has started to swing the other direction. So during my career of the last few years, we've seen what we call morphine equivalents. It kind of gives, if she's ordering oxycodone and I've ordered morphine for someone, what's apples to? It kind of gives us a way. So in morphine equivalents, they really started encouraging less and less. So from kind of unlimited down to 120, down to 90. So we've really seen the pendulum as far as providers and start changing to look at this differently. More and more data has come out that people on long-term opiates for pain, it becomes ineffective after a while, and can actually cause opioid pain itself. It's kind of like if we fill all the opiate receptors of what the brain, the patient's own morphine, basically. We put out morphine-like substances. When you're on those drugs, the brain stops putting those out. So in other words, the body can't treat its own pain with endorphins. That's where it's looking for. So, a lot more data is there. But when I really started trying to get some of my patients down off of pain medications, oh my gosh, isn't it hard? The fear of pain is huge, and I get that. And then you start wondering, well, is it substance use disorder? Is it addiction? Hey, if I'd had a few of your patients were diverting it, you didn't know that for the last 5 years. So, it can be really difficult when you're seeing patients for 20, 30 minutes every 3 months. So it's a lot of pressure on providers as well. I'm really fortunate now that almost 2 years ago, I took over the population health department. Population health has kind of been whatever we want it to be. Started out with our palliative care, and that is in home. We often treat all the way through end of life. So pain management is part of it, absolutely. And when we get to end of life, all bets are off. and you treat their pain and you treat their symptoms. But we've also been able to move into some of the community health things, which has led me to fortunately work with a lot on this panel, including Lindsay. We are trying to expand our medication for addiction therapy through the clinics. So it's something we want to work better with. And then Dale, I'm sure will tell you about the LEAD program. So trying to be involved in that. And I feel my job with population health is just bringing people together, not only from Columbia County Health Systems, but from the community as well. And I am so enjoying that role. So thank you for including me in this, and I'll pass it to Everett.
I hope I'm not in the zone where the feedback thing happens. I'm Everett Marroon. I'm the executive director of Blue Mountain Heart to Heart. We have offices in Walla Walla, Kennewick, and Parkston.
See?
What was that?
I think the Zoom.
Well, if he's in the, they can hear us. Call's not on the door. Okay.
A lot of our work at Blue Mountain Heart to Heart is for people who have already gotten engaged. They're already dependent
I
on
have closed captions now. Oh, well, I did.
So
Everett Morgan, Executive Director, Blue Mountain Heart to Heart, Fentanyl Effects.
That's great.
Can you hear me?
We do manage two different law enforcement assisted diversion programs or LEAD programs. One is called Arrest Jail Alternatives through the Washington Association of Sheriff's Chiefs. And one is called Recovery Navigator Program through the Healthcare Authority and the HSO system. And so that's a braided program, and we are expanding to Columbia County, where we're trying to help people who have been hyper-utilizers of the emergency department and of the criminal justice system, and try to like give them some supports. Some of our clients, I have one client, she was first introduced to heroin when she was in third grade in Walla Walla because her parents wanted her to shut up one night. So she never got any coping skills as a teenager, as a young adult, didn't learn what her own identity was, couldn't form healthy relationships with other people. There's a lot of work to do for some of these folks. So the real hard part for what we do is trying to engage with people who already have like lost their homes or their jobs, or they burned every other bridge and have zero support system. And so we come in as the support. One of the things that we do, and it's very controversial stuff, is we do harm reduction. So we do syringe exchange, and we do harm reduction work for people that come in there to engage. But what happens when we do that? Now, harm reduction is the most studied public health intervention of the last 25 years, of more than 1,500 studies looking at it all over North America and Europe. And when people engage, they are 5 times less likely to overdose, and they're 5 times as likely to get into treatment. So we work on that trust relationship with people who already started going down that road. They already have opioid use disorder or stimulant use disorder. And we work on what can we do with you. So we have low barrier treatment programs at all of our SSPs, and we have a mobile clinic that comes out here to Dayton, that goes to Waitsburg, also Pomeroy, St. John, Clarkston, Burbank, and Crescent. And so we make regular rounds with that 2-unit mobile clinic with a doctor and a nurse and a social worker on that. We have an in-house therapist to help people. It takes them sometimes years before they're ready to sit down and talk about all their trauma. And sometimes the trauma preceded their drug use, and sometimes the trauma happened because of their drug use, and sometimes both. We work with people who've been sex trafficked as young as 12 or 13 years old initially, We only work with adults right now, but you know, the history that they have to go really deep. So I'll talk a little bit about fentanyl after the introductions. Some of my data are a little different from what you're describing. We also had a contract with the federal government to give out naloxone, injectable naloxone and nasal Narcan. And the state, we were one of 6 demonstration sites. The state gave out through these partners 10,000 kits in 2 years. We saw that 2 doses of Narcan was enough to reverse about 98% of overdoses. So we don't see in the data that it's not responsive to fentanyl. Fentanyl certainly is a really big problem. It was wonderful for my mother when she had end-stage lung cancer, as you say, because it kept her pain-free in her last month of life. So I will always be grateful for it. But what we see in the drugs, the underground drug supply, are huge spikes of fentanyl that are inconsistent. So people might be very used to a very low-grade fentanyl pill, and then one day they get a pill that's 60% fentanyl instead of 5% fentanyl, and they just drop. So my main concern is the age of people who are coming into contact with fentanyl and then not surviving. So I'll talk a little bit about that when I do a presentation, but so we're a little bit further down the line from prevention. We're trying to steer people back to changing their use, reducing their use, getting into treatment, and getting some of those longer term supports built back into their lives so that they can have longer term success.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Greg Hall, and geez, you can hear me okay. Yeah. I work for Blue Mountain Counseling. I'm a substance use dependence professional and have been so for quite some time. I don't remember how many years, but I'm all about prevention. I think prevention is great, but when people cross that line into addiction, that's where people like me come into play. Okay, we hopefully meet them, and I mean this metaphorically, but we meet them where they're at, so they go out into the streets, but because that could be a nightmare sometimes. But, yeah, but we do like to, so they say, start from the beginning. I want to interject real quick on the data deal. I think I heard Lindsay say that the fentanyl is not the fentanyl that you think it is, and I think that's what you meant by the data. I think, man, I don't mean to speak for you, but I think you were talking about xylazine being mixed in with the fentanyl, and that does not, Narcan doesn't do a thing for that. So that's another whole subject, another nightmare we could talk about some other time. But for Dave, just suffice to say that, you know, addiction is a terrible chronic disease, and it affects a lot of people, and everyone is somebody, right? And that's why it's so important. So again, my name is Greg Hall. I'm a substance use MC professional. I work for Blue Mountain Counseling. I consider it an honor that you asked me to be here tonight, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I always stand up because I'm vertically challenged and I can't see it. But, my name is Stewart. I'm serving as your, how are you doing? Interim superintendent, and I get to try to work as best I can with your precious grandchildren and children. And we're working from the standpoint of prevention. We recently just got our first shipment in Narcan, just so we have a key communicators group, and one of our members suggested Narcan, and I hadn't thought about it. So our drug and alcohol prevention specialist, or counselor 6 through 12, took the lead on that, and we now have our first group. We'll send it out into strategic areas, and we'll do training. And the training is really interesting. It's very simple, but they don't tell you in the training modules is that when they recover or wake up, they can be very violent. So we'll make sure everybody that's able to administer the training. We do have a 6 or 12 drug alcohol prevention specialist who works in classrooms and works individually. We have a K-12 mental health counselor. The old days of the guidance counselor are no longer there. We're working with mental health because we want the kids to have great mental health, prevent them from self-medicating or choosing to make bad decisions. We just received a grant to hire another mental health specialist to work with certain kids that we have not been able to reach, so that we can be a little more intentional, a little more intensive with that. And then we have a program we call Character Strong, that's K through 12, that we've started this year with the idea of teaching kids. We know that when you serve others, you feel better about yourself. And teaching kids to come when they come into the school. What can I do for the school? What can I do for my friends? What can I do for others? It's a good approach to prevent a lot of the struggle things that come up. My colleague, when Joyce is here, she's our secondary principal. So when we go get into the question and answer, I may ask her to answer any specific questions that I cannot. So it's good to be here for the second time. And I was here 15 years ago, and some of the kids that were Maddie back there that was fairly out of diapers. I'm sorry to embarrass you, but she's almost ready to graduate. I'll be very much. So it's good to be back. Thank you.
I'm Sheriff Joe Helm, Sheriff here in Columbia County. I kind of get to see the whole dynamics from before people do drugs, after, and some of the effects and lifestyle changes people make when they're involved with the drug culture. By nature, my role and responsibility has to deal with the criminal aspect of addiction and drug trafficking and drug use, and the other crimes that come along with that. To kind of give an idea of what we try to do at our sheriff's office regarding fentanyl, but in drugs in general, is we try to do a balanced approach. We try to work on prevention, we try to work on enforcement, and we try to look at what we can do with the legislators as well to try and involve and prevent people from coming to our jail. If we can prevent somebody from coming to jail, it's better for them, it's better for us, and it's better for our community. If somebody is struggling with smaller crimes because of drug addiction, because it does drive a lot of low-level crimes as well as violent crime, what programs and referrals can we work with the prosecutor's office to help people make changes in their life so that they do not end up in our jail? And unfortunately, we also have to deal with those that commit more violent crimes as a result of drug use, drug activity. So what we try to do as far as prevention from the sheriff's office standpoint is we try to get involved with the Coalition for Youth and Families, the prevention stuff they're doing with our youth. We just had a drug take back day with the coalition where people can bring drugs back to the sheriff's office. They can bring them down to the hospital. They can bring them to Elk Drug, and our office takes them up to the incinerator in Spokane. We don't ask questions. It's just people can drop off their prescription medications, illegal narcotics, paraphernalia, drop them in those boxes, and we take them so that youth and kids and people will not have access to those things where they can abuse them. This last month, we took almost 800 pounds of narcotics through our evidence into the drug take back program to the incinerator just about a month ago. Another thing that the coalition does, and I promote the coalition not because I believe in our youth and I believe in educating our kids, because to prevent them from getting involved with it and prevent them from committing crimes, is that they do have a program coming up actually soon called Hidden in Plain Sight. And that's for anybody over 21 years of age to come down as for parents, and allows them to see how easy it is for youth to hide things in plain sight. Everything from drug paraphernalia to drug itself. And it talks about statistics of what's here in Columbia County and the state, what the trends are involved with our youth. And what you may have a perception of and what maybe the actual perception may be based on the surveys that the youth in our community take themselves. As far as the enforcement side, that's where a lot of times we are the hammer and we have to be the bad guy. We do see violent crimes as a result of people under the influence of drugs and alcohol. And with that, we have to address those issues. So with that, I am a proponent, a person who believes in a balanced approach, that there should be some accountability with resources and love and support to make people truly change. The example that I give quite a bit is when I was younger, it's something pretty dumb and a comment I made to my mother. My mom says, "Hey, you just go to your room and wait till your father gets home." If I heard that phrase, I knew that I probably did something pretty bad. And I called my mom, a name that I probably shouldn't have done when I was 12, 13 years old. That was very disrespectful. So I apologized to my mom, made good with my mom. My father comes home, comes in and talks to me, says, I understand you made a mistake, and says some things to your mother. I said, I did that. And he says, I understand you corrected that. I said, I did. And he goes, you know, I love you, right? And I'm like, yeah, I know you love me. He goes, you understand I still have to discipline you, correct? I was like, no, I learned my lesson. I'm good. I talked to mom. We are all good. We made amends. I'll never do that again. And he said, well, I need you to understand. I love you. I don't want to hurt you, but I'm gonna have to fanny whack you so you understand there's a consequence. But I love you very much. So what did my dad do? He fanny whacked me twice. I felt what it felt like, and I never called my mom a derogatory name ever again. And then afterwards, he gave me a hug. My dad was actually crying. And I get emotional about this because I had a consequence. And I'm not saying everybody involved with drug use has to go to prison to lock up for the rest of their life. But there has to be a consequence sometimes for some people to have that drive or to work through the prosecutor's office and the court to give them that incentive to go to treatment or diversion or to seek help. And that's where I think there should be a consequence where it's uncomfortable. But at the same time, there needs to be resources, support, and help that helps people to make a change if they want to change. And so that's kind of a philosophy that I have at the sheriff's office is, yes, we need to have enforcement, we need to stop the drugs, we need to stop the pushing, we need to do all these things, but at the same time, let's work together. And I know a lot of people here have a lot more knowledge on fentanyl as far as addiction and medication. But what can we do to prevent that? From a law enforcement standpoint, I do have information here that describes fentanyl and the trends from a law enforcement standpoint of how it's coming. A lot of my information comes from the Drug Enforcement Agency. My concern is in America, I believe is last year, there's 107, correct me if I'm wrong, overdose deaths in America. In Washington, we had approximately 2,500 last year. That's up 17% from 2021. That is the 5th highest increase rate in the nation. There are 4 other states that have a higher increase in rates of overdoses compared to Washington. And the reason why I'm concerned is, and I'm going to be very bold in some of my statements, is I'm concerned about our drug laws. I believe in that accountability component, but there isn't anything as far as enforcement that we can do currently. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but currently the Blake decision changed the way in which we can affect law enforcement. I give an example. We used to arrest people who would have warrants who may be in possession of drugs and have narcotics on them. Yes, we would charge them with a crime and some at the time as a felony. But the state and the prosecutor's office also have the discretion where they can work with that person through diversion, through DOSA programs that cut their sentencing and have to get them to treatment. A lot of those laws changed when the Blake decision came out. And so as a result of the Blake decision, basically became illegal for you to possess narcotics. You could have narcotics on you now. You can have fentanyl pills, you can have cocaine and all those kind of things on you, and I cannot arrest you. I could take that substance from you, and then I'd have to give you a referral for treatment. And do up arrest, which the goal was to get people to go to treatment. And after doing that twice, on the 3rd time, then you can be arrested for gross misdemeanor. Or misdemeanor. And so the issue now is there's no state database to find out if somebody had a referral. So you could give a referral to somebody and then you say, thank you for the referral, no big deal, I'm gone out here, and they never had a desire for treatment. And then you may deal with somebody who's had 5 different referrals in different places of the state. It's time to hold them accountable, hopefully give them a driving conviction with changes. But you have no knowledge if they've had prior referrals. Well, currently our legislation, basically that Blake decision expires July 1st. So come July 1st, it is not even a crime to possess narcotics, controlled substances in the state of Washington. And because legislation had decided not to pass Senate Bill 5536, which had law enforcement support from Washington Association of Sheriff and Police Chiefs to help lean towards intervention and treatment. Well, that did not pass, so now the governor basically has to schedule a special session to try and address those issues, and was just informed today. So without that, basically it would be legal to just possess and no driving force from a law enforcement standpoint. But my concern with that again is accountability with support and things of that nature. Washington State, fentanyl is coming into Washington State in heavy droves because our state has lax drug laws. And so the DEA information, I have some to share with you all. Afterwards, I can provide you with some pamphlets and information. There are two major cartels that are very familiar with Washington State. And according to the DEA, the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco cartel are focusing on Washington and the state's lax drug laws. And they're also trying to change the way that they produce fentanyl to make it more appealing for youth to become addicted and start in substances. And I have, like I said, information regarding that. Also like to share with you, for those who are not familiar, what a lethal dose of fentanyl may look like. I have some things that can be passed around as not fentanyl, it is salt. But basically, to understand what a lethal dose of fentanyl is like is approximately, depending on tolerance, and if you're doing 10 to 15 grams of salt, could be considered a lethal dose. So when you have people that are taking fentanyl from China or creating the cartels, creating it in labs now in Mexico, and these cartels are pressing pills, you don't know what they're getting it with, how much is going in and what's there. That's why we have some orders, because you have there's no quality control like that. And so people are overdosing for that, but we are targeted because some of our drug laws and overgraph. But my concern is that I don't know the exact source, but from meetings I've been to through the state, information is that we are 48 in the nation out of 51 that has addiction issues as far as 50 states and one territory. We are second to the worst in our country for providing funding and resources for treatment and to address addiction issues. And so with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions from a law enforcement standpoint, what we see, what we do. Some things I can share, some things I won't. It's investigatory and we're actively doing things. However, prevention, enforcement, and whatever we can do to participate with this panel and this group to kind of keep fentanyl out of here and educate everybody, because if you know what it is, you know what it looks like, you report it, you see it, you encourage people to stay away from it. If people don't do it, they don't know what it's going to do. And how do we help them prevent them from getting there, and how do we help them once they're there? And I believe that takes a collaborative effort, and that's what we try to do.
And I'm Dale Slack. I'm the prosecuting attorney for Columbia County. Jeff was just joking with me before we started that I'm down here at the end of the table because I'm the end of the line. And I really am in a couple of ways. And the first is I'm the prosecutor. By the time you get to my office, something has gone wrong, off the rails. But I also have another role in the county, which is that I am the ex officio coroner. Because we have less than 40,000 people in the county, I am the person who gets called out to death investigations that are not under medical supervision. And so I kind of get two different angles of fentanyl in our community. And I just, my wife asked me to speak here tonight, and the very same day I got this email, and I just want to read this to you. The drug overdose crisis in the U.S. continues to worsen. Overdose deaths involving synthetic opioids in 2020 were over 18 times the number in 2013. I'm going to pause here because you're going to hear from each of us some very different statistics. There's a reason for that. It depends on what week you look at the statistics. They have been spiking so precipitously that if you look at the statistics from January, and then you look up the statistics today, you're going to get way different numbers. And so I think earlier somebody had said it was 17 times worse, but now it's 18 times worse. Somebody else was saying it was 107,000 overdose deaths last year. This email says it was 110,000 overdose deaths last year. So again, it depends on what week you're looking at the statistics as to how many of these deaths you're going to see. The opioid epidemic in the U.S., specifically synthetic opioids, shows no signs of slowing down since the pandemic. In 2022, a staggering 110,236 people died from synthetic opioids. Data shows illicit fentanyl is now the #1 cause of death among Americans between the ages of 15 and 45. Anybody want to take a wild guess why I got this email? Because they're trying to sell me Nutwell Logistics flexible morgue solutions. Because the deaths aren't slowing down and they're getting so bad that we don't have room in our morgues to do autopsies. So what a great sales pitch to sell me some flexible morgue solutions. That's how bad it is. that they're using it to sell more supplies. I guess kind of piggybacking on something Dawn was saying earlier, she was saying the medical field has changed in the years that she has been doing her job. Drug prosecution has changed almost 360, well, no, about 360 back to where we started, 180 degrees from when I started practicing 17 years ago. I was a defense attorney back then. And what happened was you got picked up, you had some drugs on you, and the kind of industry standard way of dealing with that was you get charged with a felony, you plead to a felony, and then if you're really lucky and you can cut a deal with us, we will recommend a low sentence for a suspended sentence on that. Over the years, and especially since the Blake decision, it's just unrecognizable how we're doing this. I'm trying my darndest to stay with the times and adjust how I do things to how everybody else is doing things, but I'm having a little bit of difficulty with that. But to my mind, there are very thin lines between the three stages of how people do drug use. The first is demonization. We talk to ourselves and we say, these people are using drugs because they are weak, bad people, they can't deal with life, and they need to be put into shape, and we just need to make them come on board with the rest of us. I can tell you from both sides of the aisle that is not true, and it doesn't. I had a client, I'm not going to say too much here, but I had a client who had just started work at a construction company. He was doing great. He was on his way to a raise. He was on his way to elevation to a managerial position. And he hurt his back one day, and he knew if I go into the doctor and I tell them I've hurt my back and they put me on leave, I am even going to get fired. I'm not going to get that promotion. I'm not going to get that raise. And so what he did was he got hold of, I can't remember which opioid it was at the time. It was not fentanyl. He got hold of some of that and started taking that before he went to work so that he could get through the day without his back hurting, and he could get the raise promotion. And it just became an everyday thing. He didn't want to lose that job or that promotion. Every day he was going into work. He was functional. He was a hard worker, and everybody wanted to see him succeed, but he was using those drugs to be that hard worker. So when I hear people classify everybody who has a drug abuse problem as lazy or a bad person or terrible work ethic, and why can't they just join society like the rest of us? I always have to think back to that guy. He was not rare. He really was not. A lot of people start using drugs for a lot of reasons, and a lot of people keep using drugs for a lot of reasons. And so when we try to put everybody in the same box, nothing works. When we try to use the same solutions for everybody, nothing works. And so in between that line of demonization, the next level is compassion and acceptance. That's probably where we should be right now. But there's another thin line on the other side of that, which is enabling. And I think in certain parts of the state, if you look too hard, you can see a lot of enabling going on. There's a very big difference between saying, look, I understand you have a problem. I would like to help you with that. And I want to get you into a healthy and well-adjusted position. Let me get you some treatment. Let me get you a job and some benefits and those things. Get on your feet, stop using drugs, and go forward with your life in a healthy way. On the other side of that line is, yeah, you use drugs, and far be it from me to tell you that you're a bad person for doing that. And so I'm going to let you just go on with your life. I'm not going to pick you up. I'm not going to bother you. Go ahead, just go camp out on the street corner, do meth in your tent there, and that's really your choice and why to tell you about. That's not a good idea either. And so what I'm hoping in this county that we can do is we can stay in that middle lane between those two thin lines, where we're not demonizing people, but we're also not enabling them. Joe and I and Everett and a few other people had a meeting. Dawn was there as well. Had a meeting recently to discuss this LEAD program, and Everett didn't talk a huge amount about that, but it's basically a community-driven program. It's going to be set up with state money, but it's going to be set up with our community goals in mind. It's going to be set up with our community values it. And so this is not again, a one size fits all program that is being shoved at us by Olympia. This is Olympia giving us money and saying, do things your way that work for you. What we're hoping to do in that is take some of the lower level crimes that we see. We're hoping to take some of the police encounters that Joe and his deputies have with folks who are having problems that don't rise to criminal cases. And we're hoping at those points that we can do something to kind of put a wedge in the door and say, look, you are headed down the road that you are not wanting to go down. We have programs for you and we have services for you. And you need to take advantage of those now before it becomes the other side of that door. And one of the things I'm very worried about, and I'm going to head off right now, is people thinking that a drug diversion program is a softball approach or a soft pedaling or a touchy-feely thing. It is not. What's going to happen is when one of these people signs up for this program, they're going to have appointments to make so that they can keep in the program. They are going to have obligations and responsibilities that they have to meet. And if they don't, guess what's going to happen? Somebody will come and knock on their door and say, hey, counseling appointment today, why don't you get in the car and we'll go have one now. Somebody will come by their house. Hey, you didn't turn in your application for those housing vouchers. What's going on there? We will have people who are holding them accountable, people who are putting that pressure on them to do the best for themselves they can. So this is not a slap on the hand and being let go. This is not giving them a medal and a pony for having been some low-level crime. This is holding them accountable and also giving them that help that they need so that they can not do that anymore. Let me tell you, of all of the people that I've prosecuted and all of the people that I have defended, when they go to prison, they do not stop wanting drugs. No. If you don't get treatment, what are you doing those 24 hours a day that you're sitting in that jail cell? You are not thinking about how can I change my ways? How can I prevent this happening in the future? You were thinking, I got this path, I got this path, what can I do? 24 hours a day. If you're sitting in a prison sentence for a year and a day, you are sitting there for a year and a day, jonesing for a debt without treatment. I don't know, do we answer questions down the side?
I do, and
Okay.
you're absolutely correct on that. You sit in your cell and you wait for somebody to come in. You're like hoping for one of your friends or somebody that has something. That's all you do for 24 hours a day.
And if you think there aren't drugs in prison, I can tell you some stories. Somebody in Walla Walla worked at the pen was charged for bringing drugs in. And then that brings in a whole separate slew of problems where the people who are bringing the drugs in are manipulating the prisoners to do illegal things, and it's not a pretty thing.
No.
If we can get people into treatment, that is the only way that they are going to stop committing crimes. Punishing them is not enough. We have got to stop what is causing them to commit the crimes, which is the addiction issue. And so I probably talked a little longer than I need to, but we're looking towards doing this program. We need to have a meeting of all of the, I guess, criminal justice participants. Everett was saying it's a two-part program. The first thing that we need to do is come up with policies, which crimes we work this way, which crimes just cause so much harm to people that we can't in good conscience divert them that way, and what is the middle ground where it's a crime that causes some damage, but we want to mix probably the recovery aspect with aspects of it will both sting and soothe at the end of the day. So I think that's all for me.
And so, a couple things I forgot to say. So the format of this town hall, the way that we do our town halls usually is, we do written questions. There's note cards on the table in the hall over here and pens. So if you want to get up and go get note cards, Elise has them too. She can pass around, and then she'll be running the note cards to Jeff. I also wanted to introduce Leah Zoller, who is a peer counselor and can answer questions about recovery and other stuff. She's great to talk to. Do you want to say anything? Okay, yeah.
Hi, everyone. So I am actually freshly in recovery, 18 months. I did inpatient treatments, outpatient treatments, still currently in outpatient treatments. And moved straight from an inpatient facility into a recovery house, Oxford House, and lived there until I moved here, was end of October. So I spent almost a year in recovery housing. I was a chair for 12 recovery houses. And before I came here, I was also working in South Seattle, Airport Way South, next to the methadone clinic. I was staffing, or basically I was staffing 300 people, so security jobs, construction jobs, things like that. So those people, a lot of those people were people struggling in active addiction. So I was watching people really deep in it. The fentanyl crisis was deep there. I knew every day by which car was pulling up in front of my office, what that was, my day was gonna look like. Which drugs were good, which drugs were bad. I had testing strips in my office, always had Narcan. And I'm here to tell you that it's everywhere. And if you think that it's not here, it's definitely here. And I watched people walk through clouds of fentanyl we're not using and get very sick. You can touch doors, you can touch a grocery cart, you can go in your child's room, anything, and get very sick. So I'm hoping to get more involved in the community. I just in February completed the state certified peer support counseling program. So that is a program that works kind of like on the ground. You are someone that meets people where they're at. You're not someone above them, not a counselor, but not law enforcement, any of those things you can help them make those appointments. You can help them find housing, just talk, I've been where you're at, I know what's going on. So I'm really excited to hear about the SPEED program, and hoping to get very involved in the community in this space. So thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get ready to kick it off. The way it'll work is, obviously, somebody will collect up the cards. I'll read the cards, because some of the cards don't have any names, too. So hopefully the presenters up here, they can address it. One of the things we forgot to do is we forgot to do the pledge. So if I can get everybody to stand up and read the meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. To the republic okay, the first question I have is, it says, Jeff Higgins has training and experience with this subject. Why aren't we utilizing his expertise? I'm assuming it's.
We use every officer's expertise when it comes to narcotics, information, education, and training.
There's one on Zoom too, Jeff, if you want to read it.
Sorry about the feedback.
Can you read that?
Do you want me to read that?
I don't, can you? Got it.
Yeah, thank you. I know you are focusing.
Here, I'll read it. I'll read it.
Please.
I know you're focusing a lot on treatment this evening. I live near the cemetery and I suspect there are people selling there when I see a number of strange cars coming and going. Should I call the sheriff's office when I see such activity? This occurs when the gate is closed too.
Absolutely. Anytime anything appears suspicious or out of the ordinary, whether you think it's drug use, a person that may be in the area of prowling, call the sheriff's office. If we do not know, we cannot respond, we cannot make contacts, identify people, that doesn't happen if it's not reported. So yes, call anything in that you feel suspicious or.
I'm gonna go ahead and keep the mic off so I don't get the feedback. People say I'm loud enough. Does the officer that goes to the school also educate the students about drugs?
Yes, the sheriff's office, we've had several deputies come down and participate in career days. We've done assemblies at the elementary school level where we've talked about personal safety, drug awareness, including firearm safety. Yes, the deputies come down, they are involved with the school, and we have been down here providing information to the youth, yes.
Is there a database for countywide overdoses? Does Columbia County keep track of overdoses, not just deaths?
That's a good question. There's kind of a little bit of a problem with the record keeping in Columbia County, which is that I get in my email every month a little reminder that I need to go online and fill out.
There's my dad.
Sorry.
I get a reminder every month that I need to go online and fill out a database questionnaire about how many overdoses we had and what kind of drugs they were. The problem is I only respond to death investigations that are outside of medical help. And so if somebody dies in the hospital, if somebody is on hospice, usually if they are receiving in-home care, or if they have been to a doctor within the last 48 hours, I'm not the one who certifies the death. And so I will tell you flat out, I have had one overdose death this year. The hospital, I didn't know, and there's not, I don't know for sure. Don can actually answer that, or Everett, who keeps track of those ones. But with this system, the way it is, where the coroner is split off from every death in the county, it makes it a little bit difficult for me to know that at all.
I was just gonna say, I tracked overdose deaths in the 6 counties that we serve. And I'll say that we see very different data. They have a long lead time, so it's very hard to get. There's like an initial finding when someone passes away, if there was toxicology that shows there's a substance in there, and that county official is going to put down whether it's the cause of death or contributing factor or something like that. But then it all goes to the Department of Health, no matter where the death occurred. And sometimes they have a different process. They just seem to have a different process around they count these things. And so I've always seen variance between what the county's initially reported and then what the state reports like 2 years later. And I've asked the Department of Health many times why, and I've never gotten an answer. It makes sense to me. The only other thing I wanted to say was there's a really big difference between overdose death and overdose events that can lead to death. We had in my slide deck, which I'm happy to share later so that you could all have it if you wanted. We give out naloxone every year. We gave out 3,400 last year in our 6 county catchment, and they were used 632 times to reverse overdose. So that's like a 20%, 19%, 20% use rate. The year before that was our previous high. So in 2021, it was 301. So we went from 301 overdose reversals in the field to 632. And those don't really get picked up anywhere because only about 15% of people doing that in the field for their friends or their loved ones ever call 911. So there's nothing that's picking it up mechanically, you know, there's a mechanism for knowing that they're really out there. So I think the overdose problem is way worse. The overdose deaths are the tip of the iceberg. Of course, we want to prevent all the deaths we can, but I don't.
Just a little bit of a plug for the Narcan. Naloxone was running about $75 per. insurance companies, now that it's over the counter, don't want to pay for it. Now it's down to $50, so that's an improvement. There is you probably know it, the website that every person in Columbia or in the state of Washington can receive 2 doses of naloxone. And I think that can happen monthly. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's just give you some naloxone.
Exactly, because it may not be your life that gets saved. It might be your grandkids. It might be your neighbor. Naloxone has almost no downside, no side effects. So you're not going to hurt someone by shooting it up their nose. But you sure are going to save their lives. And if you feel like they're just the drugs of society and you don't care and you're just going to let them die, that doesn't go along with, my oath. So, use the Narcan, call 911 at the same time. If it doesn't work, then maybe it's not an overdose. Yes, they might come up swinging. You just really blocked their heart. But I don't think they wanted to die. Most people don't want to overdose. They don't want to die. They also don't want to be the life that they're living sometimes, but their coping skills are gone. And do we babysit them by knocking on their door and saying, come on, let's go to your appointment? But isn't that what we do for our brother, sister, and our neighbor when they can no longer do those things for themselves? If we do those for a few months, if we even do those for a few years, you can really find the person under the addiction, under the disease. And just a few things I forgot. One thing I guess that's nice in a way is because we do have some treatment, and that's what Lindsay and I, and where her passion is, we can use buprenorphine to bind with some of the opiate receptors, but it's a medication that doesn't have the euphoria, it doesn't have the heroin effect, and it doesn't cause overdose. Exactly. So we don't have that with alcohol. We don't have that magic drug, but we can do it with this. So it's part of where we want to be. And that's why it's going to take all of this and half of you to make this kind of improvement happen and find that middle of the road that Dan is talking about. So between Leah and, Everett's programs and the LEAD program and what Lindsay and I are trying to do, it really will take all of us to help these people that are affected. Are we going to get to them all? No. And the sad part is the death that is the fallout.
I just want to say something. I'm an RN population health. I work with Dawn closely. I've been kind of tracking the overdoses in town myself, and there has been several overdoses. There was one last week that aren't being tracked or not coming into. They are dying. So I hate to say, the question was when you're tracking overdose deaths, people are overdosing, they're dying, but they're being brought back. And there's some that are happening multiple times within the month. We had one last Thursday where her lifeless body was carried out outside and laid there because the kids didn't want to call EMS. When EMS did come, after she was laid outside because they were worried about her drugs and stuff in their housing or whatever, she had already been brought back, but that's minutes, that were wasted, and she refused EMS services. I'm finding overdoses that are happening in our local hotels and things like that have not been tracked by a hospital or by police or by EMS. So when we talk about overdoses, it's not just the death. These people are dying. They're being brought by Narcan, and they are relying on Narcan. But Narcan isn't working with the cup thing, with the Xanny, which I'm sure.
Yeah, xylazine is actually a veterinary adjunct anesthesia sedative. Columbia County Health Systems has ordered there is a antidote for it. It's had to rush through FDA because it's veterinary medicine. And of course, that is backordered because everybody's scrambling for that, but that is not something that's going to be in the community. And they don't know when their xylazine in there. The next one now, they've managed to find one that's even stronger. It's made specifically for elephant sedative. And so, yeah, it's gonna kill you. Xylazine is for sedative, so it's still a rather large animal and you take a small person and, yeah, we got nothing for that. Like that.
Okay, here's our even crazier program beyond syringe exchange, in case you thought syringe exchange was something. We have a research program with the University of Washington, along with 4 other demonstration sites around the state, to do drug checking. So, and I was pulled into this kicking and screaming because I thought, how am I gonna, I can't, I'm the ED, I'm the CEO. I gotta maintain my insurance, but it's research. So you can come in with your contraband and put it on our full spec machine and get a spectroscopy reading. And I will tell you, we now have 3 instances of xylazine in Walla Walla with trace amounts of xylazine. So this isn't a lot of xylazine. This goes in line with what Walla Walla PD has found. They have also found 2 instances of xylazine from drug busts that they've conducted. So it could be that it was like on the surface when they were cutting the fentanyl pills. But it wasn't something that was a primary, adjunct in the substance. We see that xylazine causes ulcerations in people who inject it. So one thing to know about fentanyl we haven't talked about yet is people really moved from injecting heroin 2 or 3 or even 4 times a day, and we talked earlier about morphine equivalents. That 120 milligrams is really important because once you get over 120 milligrams of morphine equivalents a day, you like quadruple your risk for overdose. So doctors prescribing legitimate medication to people don't want to go over that, that limit. And if you're doing like 2 or 3 doses of heroin, old-fashioned heroin, you probably were around 90, but of course, nobody really knows because it's all underground. When people hit fentanyl, with a 2 to 3 hour half-life, instead of heroin's 6 to 8 hour half-life, they went from using heroin 2 or 3 times a day to using fentanyl 10, 30, 50 times a day. And this is why we see such a crash with people that can no longer hold down a job, as Dale was pointing to. They can no longer be functional, and they lose everything. And then they started smoking it. So one of the things that people have done to try to reduce their own risk of overdose is they think if they smoke a little bit, then they can stop. But if they inject it, they got the whole dose, no matter what it was. I don't see any really good data in the evidence base to say that that actually stops people from overdosing. But when they go back to xylazine, they start injecting again. And then they get these really bad, medical effects from it. So you'll know when xylazine is really permeated your community because people are going to have terrible ulcerations. They're going to have amputations. They're going to have gangrene. We see really terrible things on the East Coast from xylazine right now. So we're monitoring it to try to inform people about, and it gives us an opportunity to say, hey, that drug that you just brought into us seems pretty risky. Are you sure you want to use it? I know it's going to be hard for everyone to get their mind around that program. Okay.
All right, the next question is the drug, the thiazine, known as the street name Frankenstein opioids in Columbia County? If so, has the public and students at Dayton School District been educated about this drug that is supposed to be 40 times stronger than fentanyl?
I believe that's xylazine. Yeah.
That's called
Train. Yeah. Since it is a tranquilizer. It's important to understand though, totally different drug class, totally different effect. When we say stronger, do we mean more likely to kill you? Because it's not necessarily going to be a better fight. So I think in that piece, we could do better with education. We could get more specific about why this is dangerous. That's what I think. And you're not gonna know if what you've got is, as he said, 5% fentanyl, 90% fentanyl, 40% silazine. Without the spectrograph that he's talking about, which at least that's a safety thing, if people will bring it in and have him identify what they're taking.
Harm reduction is the name of the game. So this program of making sure you've got clean drugs is not crazy at all. In fact, in other countries in Europe, people are actually having safe places where you can go and take drugs. And it's just as easy to do that as it is to get treatment for your substance use disorder. And they are seeing incredible results. We have to stop criminalizing and start making it so easy to get treatment. Because most of these people don't want to be on drugs. It changes the brain, it causes remodeling, it turns off genes and turns other ones on. It will cause mental illness that was not there before. We can physiologically see the brain remodel. So we're not talking about a character deficiency, we're talking about an organic brain disease.
We heard from heart to heart, the hospital district on harm and Blue Mountain Council reduction and demand reduction. How is Joe Helm planning on addressing supply reduction as addressing fentanyl crisis requires this three-pronged approach?
As far as what we're trying to do, as far as bringing it in or drugs coming in today, that's an ongoing, and it'll always be an ongoing issue. It's a cat and mouse game when it comes to criminals and tactics and law enforcement. We do coordinate with surrounding agencies with us. We do coordinate with the task force in Wall. We coordinate with state patrol. We even coordinate with Fish and Wildlife, who are up in the mountains and in contact with people involved with drug use and things as well. So we make a concerted, coordinated effort to try and prevent them from coming. So it is a multi-agency thing that we try to do. And we collaborate with other agencies who have expertise in those matters to assist us in our county with the resources.
The second part of this is there is a grant opening currently for a police officer to fill this position. Multi-agency task force. I guess this is Jeff has 15 years of task force training. I'm assuming you'd be aware of that.
Absolutely. So what that is a task force that is run out of Wawash Regional Task Force. There is grant money to fund officers' positions for that, and we were asked to participate in. We do not have the manpower or the staff to do that. If we dedicate somebody to the task force, that is a full-time person that takes away from us being able to perform the functions within Columbia County. And that's one of those things where before we had meetings with the task force, the prosecutor's office and myself agreed to work with them. So when we have cases, we staff with cases, the task force comes over and assists us. But we do not have the manpower to dedicate a full-time person to that position because that takes away from our local community as well, responding to the other crimes. And then when I have community members are asking about 24-hour coverage for law enforcement, if I take another deputy away from our county, we are now less likely to respond to the crimes that are currently actively being reported in our county. However, we do work with the task force. We coordinate with them. We coordinate with state patrol. We coordinate with several local agencies in the area to try and make up with it. And I think Dale is working. Well, I won't put him on the spot.
I was thinking about what I was going to say because I thought I had something here. Sorry, I was thinking of my own response rather than listening to Joe's. I just want to kind of address this issue of criminalization. I don't know a single prosecutor in the state, even 2 years ago before, or 3 years ago before we had Blake, who woke up every morning and said, "I'm gonna go put some ads in the But I do have to point out that one of the very helpful things about having a felony charge available for people who are in possession of drugs is the ladder system. When I was really in the depth of my public defense, it was a very common tactic for me to go in and say, my client can give you the guy that he buys from if you drop these charges, or if you drop it to a misdemeanor. And the prosecutor would say, okay, let's set up a meeting. And then my client would set up a controlled buy or give them enough information that they could get a warrant. And then he got his golden ticket and left, and there was a case off my desk. it's not worth it anymore. With drug possession being a misdemeanor for people to burn their dealer or their friends. They just won't do it for a misdemeanor. And so while I understand that this middle path of appreciating folks as humans and treating their illness requires some laxity of the laws, we have also lost a very important tool. And so there is a trade-off when we do that. When we decriminalize drugs, we lose a way to make it way more attractive for people to go into a treatment program, and B, we lose a tool to get people to go on their dealer or turn in their friends or give us information that will stop somebody higher up the chain. And so just be aware of that when we are talking about decriminalizing drugs and people are saying, oh, this is a wonderful thing, we're going to get people help. There's a downside to it as well. Everything is a trade-off. And so when we're talking about reducing the supply, that's a law enforcement thing, and that's something that we have lost a tool in with the late decision. And hopefully not with a fix to come, but I don't have a lot of faith in the fix that will come.
Kind of expand upon that, with some of the law changes, it took away tools that we had for investigative purposes. Exactly like the prosecutor was talking about. We could catch somebody who might have a significant amount of narcotics or controlled substance, or we catch them committing a burglary or a robbery. They have drugs on them, we could find out where that information is coming from. We no longer have it. We literally arrest people who have a warrant and they'll hand us their bags and now saying, here you go, and I have my referral for treatment. And they have no desire to help up the chain, like we said before, to get those, what they call the bigger fish, the dealers that are bringing the drug in. So tactics are constantly changing. Law enforcement is constantly changing. People involved with the drug culture and pushing drugs is constantly changing. So that's where we have to tap into the resources that we have and try to work with, like I said, in this area, multi-agencies to try to address these issues.
I'm taking the questions as I get them. So this might seem a little bit out of turn. What is the one takeaway you would like, I'm assuming this is for everyone, what is the one takeaway you would like the audience to have?
I guess my takeaway with this is that it needs to be a coordinated effort. We need everybody at this panel, and we need our community involved to address the opioid crisis, the fentanyl crisis, the criminal element of it, the treatment of it. It takes everybody. For example, we had somebody up there who had a question that she was concerned about somebody near the cemetery possibly being involved with drugs. We need that person to contact the sheriff's office. We need people to be observant, to reach out for those that need help and assistance. I think it's a collaborative effort to kind of work together.
My one hope is that people understand that drug addiction and crimes caused by drug addiction are not a one size fits all, and solution is not a one size fits all. The client I was talking about, who, excuse me, was just, Lord loves a working man who needed to go to work the next morning and so turned to drugs for that. And then there are other people who are on the other end of the spectrum. Some people are going to respond very well to just being offered treatment. Some people need a little more pressure, and there are a lot of people that I have encountered during my public defense days, especially, that are not interested in going to treatment until they have hit rock bottom. It's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. Until it has come to the point where they can see that it has gotten so bad that their life might end, they are not going to understand that they need to get treatment, get out of it. And for a lot of people, that was a felony charge. That was the point at which they said, oh my God, I really need my life, I got to do something. Yeah, I'll do the treatment if it get me out of this felony charge. So there are both ends of the spectrum here. And I am hopeful that by using that middle path, we can collect as many of those folks as possible. But I think there's also going to be some people that can wayside that direction.
So there's many things I'd like to say, but the one takeaway that I would really like everyone to understand is that, you know, drug addiction is defined, or, I mean, I've got the whole definition here, but I'm not gonna read that. It's basically continued use of a substance despite the negative consequences that substance causes in your life, no matter what that is. And the people that we're talking about here, yes, there's some people that, you know, yeah, when you first start out, you want to get high, you know, and you're curious or this, that, or the other. But I think the majority of the people that we're all talking about are those people that, you know, they no longer use to get high. They use to not be sick. So it's no longer a choice for them, right? They have to use or else they're going to be sick. There are those people, as Dale and everybody else, Sheriff Helm, everybody else has touched on, that yes, I mean, you know, drugs were created for a reason, right? Opiates were created for a reason, and I think a good reason. I'm actually an advocate for opiate use, for those people that can use them and they can maintain anyway, that's another deal. But I also see what happens when they cross that line into addiction, right? And then I just want everyone in the audience to understand that when they cross that line, they're not using to get high. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be redundant. Right? And then the other thing is, I know this is one thing, but dash one, okay, is 30 days treatment isn't enough.
No.
That's the easy part. That's the easy part, right? 30 days treatment. That's when the hard work starts. Hard work starts when they get out of treatment. Please understand that. And this is a lifelong process. I've treated people that have had 25, 26, 27 years of sobriety and lost, you know, well, they didn't lose it. They still had it, but you know, they relapsed. It's just the nature of the beast. So like I said, the one takeaway is if everyone could understand that, I'd be a happy camper, I guess. So, all right, thank you.
I also have more than one thing, but I'm trying to stick to one. I'm a Gemini, you know, I have to always have two things.
And I'm a Leo, mine have to come first.
There you go. Well, you got what you wanted, okay? We didn't get into this overnight. We're not gonna get out of it. I feel like everybody is so. You can look around and you can see homelessness. You can look around and you can see people acting way outside the bounds of what is socially acceptable behavior in public. There was someone in Walla Walla naked on the street corner, except for their underwear, screaming their head off. And nobody felt like they could do anything about it. Law enforcement said they're not actually breaking the law. They're not over 90 decibels for more than 30 seconds. It's not at past a certain hour. They're actually covering the part of their body they have to cover. They can stand there and scream, but did it unsettle every single person in the neighborhood? Yeah. You couldn't, nobody wanted to talk to them, you know. So there's stuff that we can see, and we can see this is really not normal. This is not usual. This is not a virus. This is a policy failure, a really long policy failure. We prescribe hundreds of pills per person living in Washington State. And what did we think was going to happen? A lot of people got rich from this. We didn't get rich from it. None of us here got rich from it. And they're going to pay, what are they giving you, Dale and Joe? $10,000 a year for the settlement?
Lucky. No, it's actually, I think it's like 6 actually.
Walla County is getting $40,000 a year. What are we supposed to do with $40,000 a year? This is not scary. Use the language. My takeaway is we can always screw up tens of thousands of people at a time with bad policy, but we can only help people one person at a time. So the patience is required of the community. Certainly, we need to be accountable ourselves as practitioners and policymakers and people doing the service to the community. Right? We need to be transparent. The great thing about LEAD is any one of you can stand up and say, you know what, I want to be involved in that operational work group. I want to be involved in your policymaking group. I want to come and I want to help set the parameters for the program. And we'd say, sure, you're a community member, come on in. Anybody can refer. My neighbor is really out of control. We rolled up to Pomeroy with our mobile medical clinic. And it was this like Vietnam vet that came up to us and he's like, yeah, I need a COVID vaccine. Well, okay, we give you a COVID vaccine. We're really here to try and help people who use the drugs. And he says, well, my grandson's home is around the corner here. I'll take you to him. And there were like 6 people in that house in Pomeroy. You know? So it is everywhere, but we can only help people one at a time. And it's you know, I get up every day and put my big kid and really big kid pants on and say, let's go change a life. And I'll tell you, I see success every day, just like you. Almost all of our case managers on lead have lived experience. I got 2 people who used to be bangers on opposite gangs. They work together great. It's amazing. One of them got out of DOCA and they were so excited for him. DOSA, yeah. They were so excited for him. You're a what now? Case manager and lead? He's great. You know? You never know when life is going to change for some. So we just stick in there with them. But I'm going to say, it's a slog. Don't kid yourself. That's why we want prevention first.
It's been eons that humans and even some animals, there are some trees that kind of ferment. And there's certain animals that go every year to that tree because there's fermented fruit. So the eons change, the decades change, the century changes. But we seem to go for things that might alter or give us pleasure. Like cookies. Anyway, addictions can be a lot of things. But the one case of a person who ends up in ICU for 30 days because they smoked fentanyl and had a respiratory failure. The mix hurts their kidneys. They've injected xylazine and they have a wound that is infected down to the bone. The hundreds of thousands of dollars that one case is going to cost, we can use peer counseling, members of the community who would drive that person to their mental health providers that we can get trained. All those things are actually really super inexpensive than what we're doing. So I guess that would be the takeaway.
One takeaway. I think I would say the addict is not the problem. The drug is the problem. So kind of wrap your head around that. The addict is not the problem. These addicts out here, they're not the problem. The drug is the problem. And I say this because I've been treating addiction for so long, and addicts are extremely cool people. Every one of them. They've been through it. They've been through stuff you can't even imagine. And if you can help just one re-enter society, you've got yourself a warrior. That person can do anything. They're incredible. They're fantastic. They've seen it all. They've been through everything. They're humble. They will humble you, and they will take that job and they will rock it. Every time, right out of the park. We need them. And we need them to be in recovery in a very visible way so that other people can see, oh my gosh, this is what it looks like. This is how they did it. There's hope for me. There's hope. And it's really, really easy to come make appointments with the truth. Just saying. Okay.
And I hope that population health will be part of that and really co-oping with all these other people to help our community.
Can I just say one thing about Senate Bill 5536, because that is the Blake repair for this session. And then we've talked a little bit about it. Blake decision happened because the legislature knew for 30 years that the law that they had was problematic because it didn't have a little Latin phrase in it to have, like the knowledge of the crime, mens rea. It's so simple. We were the only state in the country that didn't have it, and we were warned it could be found unconstitutional, and the legislature didn't fix it. So when the state Supreme Court came out and said, it's not constitutional, everyone who'd ever been convicted of it had to have that thrown out. Every time you get sentenced, based on what the charge was that you were convicted of. So everybody had to have their sentences recalculated. The cost alone of doing that for people back to the 1970s is really big. And we all have to pay for it as taxpayers. So they came out with a simple, had been a felony, they came out with a simple misdemeanor, and your sheriff is absolutely right. There was no plan. They had things in there like, we're gonna have care navigators. What the heck is a care navigator? Nobody knew what that was. They said they had to be certified. By who? You just made this name up. What are you talking about? When I say bad policy, that's also bad policy, And just as an aside, I think we've really outgrown a part-time legislature, but okay, let's just stick with what we have. So we had people kind of on the right side of the aisle saying we really want strong penalties. We had people on the left and far left side of the aisle in our legislature saying we're going to really help people with treatment. We had an agreement between those two sides. It was going to be a great moment for democracy, and at the last minute, both polls of people were told not to vote for that bill. 3 hours before Sine died, which is the end of the legislative session. By statute, it has to end. So it just left the people in the middle voting for it, and that wasn't enough. Now they're going to come back on the 16th. My hope and prayer is that they gavel in, they vote for the dang bill, and they gavel in, and they leave us all with what we've got. I hear it's going to be a gross misdemeanor. So the compromise, the way it looks right now, I have followed this thing really closely. I've testified on behalf of this bill or as other on this bill 4 times this legislative session. So the compromise is going to be there's more money for treatment, somewhere around $50 to $60 million for treatment statewide. And it's going to be a gross misdemeanor. So each side from the classic American compromise is going to have to give something. So maybe they'll actually get it done. If they don't get it done, they're absolutely right. We refer to the state law that was found unconstitutional on July 1, which means it's unenforceable. It's still written on the books, but nobody can cite you for that, which would then mean that every municipality can write their own simple possession ordinance. It is not a law. It cannot be a felony because municipalities cannot create a felony. They can only do simple or gross misdemeanors. That would be crazy to have every single city and county writing their own stuff. Nobody would know how to prosecute anything. People would go to different places. It could be a rush to the most punitive, because if I have a worse law in my town, you're going to go to the next town over to use because you want to get caught here. Just like dealers go over into the Idaho border to sell all their dope because they can sell it for 3 times the price because Idaho has really strong anti-drug laws. And they do that on purpose. So SB 5536 will be in a special session on May 15th, and I highly advise you to contact your legislators and say, do what you have to do to pass a statewide law on this. Otherwise, it's really going to be chaos.
Okay, next question. Would you please share what's available in Columbia County for those struggling with addiction and mental illness? Thank you.
So I hear Blue Mountain Counseling has a new substance use disorder professional working there. So you can always make an appointment with him. His name's Greg Hall. But no, I kid. But I did look into this. Now, I don't want to make this a real long answer, but I want to go back to the beginning when I started in this in a gopher position and fell in love with addictions, and so that brings me here today. But I want to say this. Unfortunately, addictions has fallen prey to financial need, maybe. Let me put it that way. Let me be nice about that. Financial need. So I went from saying, thank you for calling thus and such. How can I help you? To thank you for calling thus and such. What kind of insurance do you have? Right, which is really sad. But the good news is that I have found that there are a lot of, well, I don't want to say a lot, but there are a few places in Washington State that still take Medicaid. And I have a list of those in my office. Of course, you know, Lindsay and Dawn as well in the hospital. You know, but I do want to throw this out there. Anybody on this panel, any organization that this panel rep, I know nobody wants to go to the prosecutor's office and go, hey man, I'm a girl, you know, I understand that. But what I'm telling you is that everybody up here would be dedicated to get you where you needed to be. Okay, for Columbia County or anywhere else. Now look, I've only been here for about 3 going on 4 months, but I know these people well enough that I know that I can say that. So long story short, it's out there. If all else fails, come and see me at Blue Mountain Counseling. And I know other people would want me to say the first thing you do is come to Blue Mountain Counseling. But you have to go somewhere where you feel comfortable, first of all, and I understand that. But reach out to somebody, you know, and I hope that helps.
One good thing is it's been hard, and Lindsay had to really work hard to get her X waiver so that she could do medication for addiction therapy with buprenorphine. I believe it's July. You won't need the X waiver anymore. So that really expands. We've only got 2 providers doing buprenorphine at Columbia County Health Systems right now. That is going to expand. So I think that's going to really increase access. Also, as the rural clinics, we can only bill for mental health services from a licensed, certified MSW. It's extremely hard to get. They need 4,000 hours of, you know, non-paid clinical experience before it can bill. That law also is going to change, and Medicare and I believe Medicaid will follow, that we can start billing for that lower level. So I think that's going to help open up the mental health aspect. You can get an appointment with Lindsay. I mean, we want to get people in for buprenorphine treatment. It starts to get them away from having to do crimes to afford their drugs, having to prostitute themselves for drugs in payment. We know they're getting something safe. And that also gives us the connections and those moments in time where we can meet with them and find services. There's a crisis hotline. It's actually manned by Comprehensive Mental Health. Crisis hotline, Comprehensive Mental Health also has services. It is in Walla Walla. They service Medicaid, pretty much Medicaid only. So those are definitely things out there. 988 is the crisis national hotline as well. So the Veterans Crisis Line has one. When people are ready to get help, they're ready to get help now. So that's really something that's needed too, is being able to get people services in a timely. Gee, I can see you in 3 minutes.
I was just gonna add, you don't have to change your primary provider to me to get substance abuse treatment. I realize there's a lot of misconceptions about Suboxone and buprenorphine. It is okay to make an appointment with me and argue with me. It's okay to make an appointment, just ask questions. And if you're not interested in Suboxone treatment, there are other treatment options available. Okay, that options.
Well, I was just gonna add, Blue Mountain Heart to Heart runs the medical program at the Walla Walla County Jail. We do buprenorphine prescribing there. We do have, as I said at the beginning, tonight, we have low barrier buprenorphine treatment programs, clinics, one in Walla Walla and one in Kennewick, which means you don't need an SUP assessment to come in and get prescribed that day. If you meet certain other criteria, then you're just in front of us. But we have also started Sublocade, which is a long-acting, month-long buprenorphine injection. It's a little tricky initially with fentanyl users because you have to fill in with the kind of the strips, the regular Suboxone strips. But then they are maintained on Sublocade all month. And so it's a lot easier for people to manage, especially if they're like later in treatment or something like that. So that is an option for people too. I know we're a little bit of a drive. Great, okay, so.
Yes, Sublocade. Kind of new, great, 30 days. And versus the daily Suboxone. I believe public health as well locally certainly is a place that people can walk in and they know the connection. So, you know, public health as well would be an access.
When the lead program gets going, will there be services in place, i.e. rehabilitation, therapy, etc., to refer people?
Yeah, we're just gonna take referrals and then that's it. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, I mean, what the programs do is kind of bring people in who've been very hard to serve, who are gonna be trying other things and they haven't worked and they're still, you know, reoffending or they're in the emergency department a lot. And then there's an initial assessment that case manager is going to do with that person. So the very first thing that happens is the outreach manager goes and sees them. We will have a dedicated outreach manager here in Columbia County, just serving people in this county. And they will, you know, tell them how the program works. Everything about LEAD is voluntary. The people in it, the clients, they're there voluntarily. The people who come to the operations work group and the policy coordinating group, they're there of their own volition. Nobody is having anything held over them. And so that actually tends to increase people's engagement in the program because they know they can walk out the door. But the fact that they're not walking out the door must mean I want to be here. Wait a minute, what's happening to me? So once they're referred and then they get they talk to the outreach manager, they get presented at the operations work group, and that group of professionals sits there and says, yeah, I think Danny would be great for this program. I know that he was, they have like a multi-party release of information agreement with each other so they can actually talk to each other, and that individual has signed off on that before you sit in that operation work group meeting. So you can say, yeah, we saw Danny in population, you know, my population health database like 4 times last week. And it was the same complaint about a toe, you know, and he was intoxicated, you know, 3 of the 4 times we saw him or something like that. And we'll all have that discussion and we'll say, okay, this person's great, let's bring them into the program. Then they get assigned a case manager, and that case manager does all those linkages to care by way of doing an assessment. So it's like a 14-point, you know, aspects of daily life assessment, everything from mental health to housing, you know, to are they employed or not, what kind of drug use, what kind of severity of drug use do we think we see with them, et cetera. And then we put together, you know, what is the plan for this person? We use a shared decision-making model with that person to say, okay, well, what are your top 3 goals for the first 3 months that we're going to work together? Well, I really got to get out of my RV and into some, you know, more stable housing. That'd be number 1. So that's kind of how we build together with the client and get them to start investing, and we start modeling for them, you know, how grown-ups grown up in the world, and we start trying to, you know, those brains are so plastic, as you said, we start trying to get them to make some of those changes mentally about who they are and what they can demand of themselves. So we're not always the ones demanding it of them, and then they say, wait a minute, I deserve better than this. We go, okay, the light went on. So It's gonna use the service array that you have here in Dayton and Columbia County. And if there's something that they need that's not immediately available here, we will all do our best to bring it to their support. Does that answer that question? Okay. I apologize for my long-windedness.
No problem. With research showing that phone and video games can affect the brain similar to how narcotics do. My question is whether we are addressing these types of addictions in any systematic way.
Short answer is yes. Every assessment that I do, asks about TV, video games.
Born,
What is it?
born.
And then some, so, yes, so it is being addressed. Addiction is, addiction is addiction, I think. Either Dawn or Lindsay said it a few minutes ago, you can be addicted to anything. Anyway, yes, it is being addressed.
Kind of very-
I'm so sorry.
Regarding the statistic that Washington State has the fifth highest overdose rates, do the other 4 states with high rates also have weak drug enforcement laws? Thank you.
Yeah, when I was talking about the fifth, that talks about the increase over last year. So that 17%, according to the statistics that I had, our increase is 17% more overdoses, not all of them necessarily tied to fentanyl, but overdoses. And that was fine. That is basically, I will give you the 5 states here real quick. Delaware, Oklahoma, Delaware, Nebraska, not Nebraska. Behind Maine, Oklahoma, New Hampshire, and Delaware. Now, that's not to say that those are the states that have the highest overdoses. Those are just the increases over the last year. So statistically, from where we were a year ago to where we are now, we're 70% higher in that rate of overdoses. And on the statistical side, that puts us over this last year is that increase over compared to last year is 17%.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that causation equals correlation. It doesn't have to mean that it's because of criminalization laws that the overdose have increased. There's a lot of other factors that.
And then on the side note, from the law enforcement standpoint, you have people who are pushing the fentanyl, pushing the drugs, they do take advantage of the latch laws. So they are going to, like, for example, cartels, according to the DA, do focus on their state because of that. And so they do push more of this, they try to make it more appealing. I have some things here, for example. They're decorating the pills in rainbow form. They have chalk form, like it looks like sidewalk chalk. They have the fentanyl and crystal should not be advertised. It's almost like advertising to kids to get them addicted to cause this problem, which leads to criminal behavior. It's ridiculous. But I do think, I'm not saying all the states, I can't speak for any other state. I can speak for the information I know about our state and from what I've been trained and taught from the DEA and training. Is that they are focused on our state because of our laws, because it's easier. I mean, they can push it, they can bring it. It's not able for people to possess it, so they're going to focus on that distribution manner to try and get it into that area because there's no point for them pushing the drugs out.
This happens to be for Sheriff Helm. The drug take back day was an awesome start, and I want to thank you. Is there any chance you might make this service available daily by installing a secure depository in your office?
There is one at the sheriff's office. So there is a drug take back box in the front lobby of the sheriff's office. Nobody asks, nobody looks. We do not ask what's going in the box. We don't document anything. There's tie-back envelopes where you can come in, bring medication, vitamins, illegal narcotics, whatever you want to bring in can be dumped there. We have one at Elk Drug. Elk Drug is the most popular one. It's the one that goes up the fastest. And there is one also down at Dayton General Hospital as well. We do have one more box that is available. It's just a matter of finding a location for that and use. That's one we used to move around for the events. But if anybody has another idea, what thinks would be a good place to place one, we'll be glad to use that in that location. We used to. It was at Blue Mountain Council, but we use that for the drug take back. So I got you. if you need it bad. But I think that's one of those things too. It is a great program because, again, from the prevention side of it, it gets those drugs away from grandparents' medicine cabinets and parents' medicine cabinets where teenagers, kids who are starting to experiment get into them, they're not ready to get available. So I really encourage anybody, any kind of medication, whatever it is, use the drug take back policy.
Don't flush them down.
Yeah, it was a program that was covered under a grant. It is no longer covered under the grant, so as the sheriff's office, we said we're just gonna continue paying for it and make the trip to try to.
The next question statement, start with the statement. Throughout human history, we choose to mask our pain through one method or another, alcohol, food, drugs, etc. The only real answer is to help people get to the bottom of their issues. Choose not to use drugs, alcohol, food, or whatever. Jail or even a 28-day treatment program isn't enough. Does the LEAD program you're proposing deal with the root cause of addiction?
We don't think we get to it otherwise. So yes. And as Dale said several times, every person is different, every history is different. People get caught up in different kinds of issues and then they have different sources of shame. And, you know, and we often find that it's that if we can get to the source of shame, we can get to the root of the addiction. You know, I'll tell you one story. We have a field-based counselor in Walla. Her name is Delia, and she goes wherever they are. So, you know, she'll say, I'll buy you coffee at McDonald's or whatever, and they'll do the meeting there. She'll meet them at the bus depot, she'll meet them in the park, they'll just take a walk around the block, you know, and they'll do the therapy session there. And there was this one person, one day, he'd done, you know, several years in prison for like aggravated assault. And then, you know, but that was like deeper in his past, right? So he could be a violent person, had the capacity, let's say. He was one of those people that we were kind of on the fence about, like, should this guy be a leader? Are we going to get to something with him? You know, is outpatient going to be enough? Going to be supportive enough? And he called her up one day and he said, somebody stole my car. I can see where the car is. I see it. I found it. And I want to bust this guy big time. And she said, have you called the police yet? Because, you know, they're not allowed to steal your car. So I called the police and they said, we're really busy. We can't help you.
That's perfect. That wasn't.
It was not a Columbia County. It's not you, Sheriff. He was really mad. He said, I know someone with a gun. I really want to go and deal with this guy. And she talked him down. And it was because they had that trust relationship for like the last 3 months, you know. Anytime he wanted to see her, she was available. You know, there were weeks where she saw him once. There were weeks where she saw him at 4 sessions with him. You know, and he really trusted her. And she said, you really want to throw everything away? Now, is it your kid? It's your car. You know, okay, all right. And he trusted in her and he trusted himself. And the next day he went over there with a friend and said, excuse me, did you need that car for something? Because if you need a ride somewhere, they were so sad about the, they were so, whatever, I'm so sorry, etc. He got his car back. He didn't hurt anybody. He didn't have to go back to jail. He didn't have to be arrested, but he got hurt, and I'm really like, he was great for me. Who knew? It's really, I know it's a wacky story, but it is like, did she prevent a homicide? I don't know, but we knew that he was capable of stuff like that. But we knew that if we just kept engaging this guy, and we always respected him and met him where he was, maybe we could make an impact. We made an impact. This is like perfect. No, but we prevented something really bad from happening. So the short answer is yes. Long answer is definitely yes. That's the whole point of LEAD. And do we see progress with every single person? No, we don't. Of course not. But if we present the program to people we're gonna get more people supported, we're gonna get more people to change their hearts and their ways. So that's what we're doing.
Yes, as part of the lead, obviously, to have the operations group and to be able to bring heart to heart in. Having Greg Hall is huge. Columbia County Health Systems, when I first being population health, I knew that Lindsay and Dr. Biggs both needed really some support. They had the passion for medication for addiction therapy, but I didn't know enough what makes a good clinic. And one of the first things Lindsay said to me, besides giving drug testing cups and training for staff, was it's got to be mandatory that they are in counseling. Because there is so much involved. She can get the medication that keeps them from being sick, but yeah, we've got to get to that underlying. So we've been trying to rebuild our mental health and our behavioral health at the rural clinics, and that's been a real desert here for that. So we were super glad that Greg was here. Paul Isle does wonders as our community health worker, dealing with whoever Teresa helps give them a hand up. So we've been able to, find those resources, but we hope the stars are aligning and that mental health aspect that is so important. We hope we can start to provide that as well. Yes, we didn't have Narcotics Anonymous here, which was a huge part of that. And thanks to Teresa spending her time, and we do have a Narcotics Anonymous. So twice a week now, it's at the Delaney building, and that's a huge part of it as well.
Greg, would you explain to the audience about the lack of treatment facilities and the common issues that get treatment?
Yeah. Could you repeat that one more time?
Could you explain to the audience about the lack of treatment facilities and the common issues seeking treatment?
Yeah, okay, so first of all, I kind of touched on this a little while ago in saying that a lot of treatment facilities are now money driven, right? So, and I'll just give you a quick idea. When the first facility I started in, a 30-day facility, if you paid cash, if you didn't have insurance, they wouldn't accept Medicaid. If you paid cash, it was $1,700 a day to stay there. Now, I don't know about you, that'd be a little tougher for me to manage. And I think the reason we are lacking facilities is probably that. In addition to that is just a rehab facility, like a residential, there's different levels, right? There's level 1 in outpatient, and there's a 3.5 residential, there's 2.1 IOP. I know you don't understand all that, and I barely do. So, but yeah, right, exactly. So, suffice it to say that it's unfortunately money driven. I think that's the short answer. So those facilities out there, and where I was going with that was getting older, is the residential facilities themselves can't do it all. For instance, when somebody agrees to go to resident, they may need detoxification services first, which may require 5 days or 10 days of detox. Well, I don't know, 10 days, but anyway, let's say 5 days. Insurance companies aren't going to pay for detoxification services. So what do? So there's a lot of, all I'm saying to you really is there's a lot of factors. It's not as easy as someone saying, hey, I think I'll go to treatment today. You go there, you take your suitcase, you walk in, Hollywood does a great job of making us believe that, you just go there for 28 days and your life's all better. But it really doesn't work out that way. So
That may be 28 days.
there you go. Yeah. So that's the short answer is my own belief is that unfortunately it's like every other industry has become money driven, but listen, the good news is there are still some facilities. I'm finding some facilities. We are finding some facilities to send people to, and we are seeing some successes. So I'd like to end it with that. Yes.
I'd like to add a
Sure.
little bit that, so, I have state insurance. And I decided I wanted to go,
You want to buy?
I think I'm not, but.
There you go. People on Zoom.
All right. So when I went to, decided I wanted to go to treatment with state insurance, I was in King County. And it took me almost an entire month, phone calls, just to get an assessment. To get into a place that would take my state insurance, that would also get me into detox. It was so complicated. I would call one place and they're like, okay, call this place in Everett. That's Snohomish County. If you do your assessment there, you cannot go to treatment. Or the insurance wouldn't pay. So the point is that they don't make it easy. There's nothing easy about going. And for people who want to go or feel like they need to go, I can see as someone who had the means and the time to try to make it happen, how people who are unhoused, don't have cell phones, don't have access to things, would just say, that's it, continue on doing it. So it's money driven, but it's also so complicated, even if you have insurance or state insurance or any of these things, it's just not an easy process.
That's why you need a peer support specialist to help you through the process.
I think this is, seems to be the last question, but I think you addressed it to a large degree. If and when resources were being offered, what are those resources? What specific plans are in place for someone wanting help? And who is being called to help when someone is in crisis?
Yeah. So.
I guess it would depends on who you contact.
Exactly.
What the problem is
Yeah.
and how you quarterback it, for lack of a better term. I don't want to take any word from.
But they all end up in the same place. They all end up with unless we're gonna find out what the underlying cause is, you're not really gonna receive. And then you got the motivation factor. You have some other things that come into play there, so as well. And like Everett pointed out, you've got three distinct questions there, but, anyway.
I just like to jump over. I think if you went to anybody up here on this panel, whether it was Lindsay, Dawn, prosecutors, or even the sheriff's office, we give people referrals, or refer them to people, obviously, that we don't provide treatment or services for certain things. But we do deal with people in crisis. But I think anybody here will get in contact with somebody that will help support and get involved.
And even at my low level as a teacher, I know for the school district, there's a lot of things that we find out secondhand. I bring it up to the chain, and they make the contact with people and say, hey, this is who you need to contact, those kinds of things. Because, whether you like it or not, to a certain extent, we are brothers keepers. To a certain extent, we have to be for small community.
And Jeff, with that, I want to make a plug real quick. There is a community needs survey going around so that you all can fill out with your input on what you think our community needs as well. So you can contact public health, the coalition people there as well. Because that also takes into your thoughts, your opinions, and your advice as far as what we need in our community.
There's one more question on Zoom. Oh, maybe it's not a question, maybe it's a statement. Alicia says that is the biggest disconnect when people are ready to help. There are so many hoops to jump through, no beds available, wait lists, etc., which we talked about.
I don't keep the process that is consistent across areas. It's been so hit and miss. So yes, whether the connections that we've made through LEAD or being on this panel, to really form a cohesive entry point and to make sure that everybody, at Narcotics Anonymous and Palliative and every place else knows what that process is, to try to get people the quickest facilitating where they need to be and what they need to do. Because detoxing and where it's so complicated, and delays can be deadly, and they may not be as you lose contact with them. They became homeless, now they're in another county. And until they get brave enough again, or hit that rock bottom, and so I think it is something that we can do better here. So that more people know, so the new school nurse knows, everybody kind of knows where the best pathway is.
But I do just want to add that that's for inpatient treatment, which is not the only treatment option available, because we do realize how difficult it is to get a bed. So let's talk nuts and bolts. Let's say I don't know, Bob, he's got a substance abuse disorder. He calls the clinic, 382-3200. He says, I want to make an appointment with Lindsay. I need to talk about personal issues. And they say, okay, no questions asked. You come see me. You're going to do an intake. We're going to determine, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. You're going to pee in a cup. Depending on what you tell me, you may or may not get a short script or a home induction. Buprenorphine is really safe. It's so safe that there's about a million different ways that you can start yourself on it at home. You do not have to be in withdrawals for 3 or 4 days. We are not talking sicker than a dog type induction. While you're in that appointment, I will probably help you call Blue Mountain and make an appointment with Greg while you're there. Then you'll make an appointment with me in about 4 days, just so I can make sure you're not having issues. 24 hours you do have an issue, you call, you say, I want to talk to Lindsay's nurse. I've got a question about some stuff. And then we call you back. Outpatient treatment, low barrier, extremely safe. You've got resources. We're talking same day. So that's easy.
I was just gonna add, when I say policy failure, inpatient, residential, outpatient, behavioral health, that's the policy failure in large part. We grew this system up separate from the medical system. The medical system is designed to have a strict hierarchy, so everyone knows what they're doing, they don't know what their parts are, and supposedly they'll all work really well together, although the medical people told me there's lots of issues with the system. But behavioral health is like a big competition. And our service is better than your service. And this place only has 16 beds, because if we had 17 beds, we need a whole other level of federal regulation, and nobody wanted to hire the 3 additional people who would be reporting for the 17th bed. So you'll see a lot of places where they have 16 beds for everything. And that's it. And then they fill up and then you're waiting. So there's a lot about behavioral health as a sector that really is not about the patient. It's not patient focused. So these professionals help people navigate that system. It's really easy for someone who feels really bad about themselves to not be able to navigate this on their own and think it's because I'm such a mess up, it's because I'm such a terrible person, and then just give up, just like you were saying. And sometimes it's not an anger response, sometimes it's a despondent response. But I think, if someone can be managed with outpatient or even intensive outpatient, I think we would pretty much all recommend the lowest level of intervention possible to support that person and stabilize them and help lead them to lasting change.
Does anybody have any last questions? We're right on time. Yeah.
So I should have done this earlier, but I just want, and all the kids in Columbia County are gonna hate me now. But this is new to me as well. Is everyone in the audience familiar with the cute little app Snapchat? Where you go on there and you make faces well, that's how your teens and your grandkids and your kids are ordering their drugs from the drug dealer. They go on Snapchat and they put these emojis in there, right? For the drugs that they want and where they're gonna pick them up and where they're gonna meet them. So just an FYI. So when I'm not saying, go crazy and take all their phones and go, but monitoring will help. Okay, just to see what they're doing. Okay, so I just want to throw that out there. The other thing is I've got 2 really cool pictures. Sheriff Helm put out the pictures of the fentanyl, the dosage that will kill you. These are also pictures like that. And the only reason I want to bring it up is because my boss would probably kill me at the amount of ink that I use, colored ink that I use from the printer. But since she's not here, I'm going to show that to you guys. So anyway, if anybody wants those or we want to pass around, whatever, that's what these are. In addition to Sheriff Helm's deal. Yes, sir.
right, folks, thank you. I want to thank the panel for being here. We do appreciate it. Information was good. Stuff I didn't know.
So, if you want to run our, email list, there's a sign up on the table over there. Be advised of all of the things that we're doing. Thank you.
You're welcome. Cut that down, so they don't get behind you.
Oh, yeah. That.
Yeah.